Welcome to the deep dive. When I first saw this, The Alchemy of Economics, on our list of potential deep dives, I have to admit, my first thought was, is this some kind of joke? Finance and alchemy? Really?
Laugh slightly. I can see that. It's not the most intuitive pairing.
No, not really. But the thing is, and maybe this happened to you too, the more I sat with it, the more that initial skepticism morphed into this burning curiosity.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, what if there's something there? What if our entire financial system is built on this foundation of magic? That's something we don't even recognize anymore. So, listeners, buckle up. Today we're diving into the alchemy of economics, and trust me, this one's a wild ride. So I've got to ask, what's the connection here? I mean, finance and this whole alchemy thing, help me out here.
Well, as you said, it sounds strange at first, right? But what this source dives into is the historical relationship between, well, finance and these ancient mystical traditions, things like, alchemy, Kabbalah.
Okay, wait, hold on. So we're talking about a real tangible link here. This isn't just like people using the word alchemy as a metaphor for the financial markets or whatever. There's an actual historical connection we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't metaphorical. The source argues that during the Renaissance, when all this ancient wisdom was being revived, it wasn't just an academic exercise, It actually had a real impact on how we think about money and value and the systems we build around them.
Okay, now my mind is officially blown. So give me an example. How does this ancient magic stuff actually show up in our modern financial systems?
Well, take double entry bookkeeping, for instance. I mean, it's pretty much the bedrock of accounting, right?
Yeah, debits and credits, keeping everything balanced, the basics. Boring but important, or so I thought.
Right, exactly. But the source suggests it's not just a practical invention. It's almost like a ritual, a way of creating this illusion of control and objectivity. We think we're just balancing the books, but the system with its, like you said, its debits and credits might actually be shaping how we view wealth itself. Like it makes it seem like this concrete, measurable thing when in reality...
It was all smoke and mirrors. Wait, so you're saying my bank statement is basically an alchemical spell? Laughs. That's both really cool and slightly terrifying at the same time.
Well, maybe not quite a spill. But the source does argue that bookkeeping can be a form of magical art. It's about using language, the specific language of accounting to, in a way, legitimize profit. Think about terms like, I don't know, goodwill or intangible assets. These are very abstract concepts, right? But we give them this concrete value in our financial system.
Okay, that's a really interesting point. So it's like, what, rhetoric in accounting? We're using language to influence how people perceive value.
Yeah.
That's fascinating and kind of unsettling, honestly. Give me an example of that. How could language be used to say, well, I don't know, legitimize profit at someone else's expense? What would that look like in the real world?
Well, think about how corporations report their environmental impact, for example. They might use terms like sustainable practices or carbon offsets to kind of downplay the negative consequences of their actions, right?
I see what you mean.
The language makes it seem like they're balancing the books of their environmental impact when, in reality, the true cost might not be fully accounted for, or they're passing those costs on to someone else down the line.
Right, right. It's all about how you frame it. Okay, this is really making me think differently about all this. And it makes me wonder, if bookkeeping can be used like that, what about other financial concepts? I mean, the source also talks about the time value of money. Any mystical connections there, too? Because, honestly, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised.
Right. Well, you're right to be skeptical. But yes, the source absolutely makes a connection there. It goes back to this ancient human desire, right? The desire to control nature, to command the elements, to have power over things that feel beyond our grasp. And the source connects that directly to our modern financial systems.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I'll admit I don't quite see the connection yet.
Think about it this way. When we manipulate interest rates, set loan terms, all of that, what are we really doing? We're putting a price on time. We're saying time literally has a monetary value. And that, in essence, becomes the engine of our entire economy.
Okay, wow. When you put it like that, so let me get this straight. When the Federal Reserve, tweaks the interest rate up or down 0.25%, they're basically our modern-day sorcerers trying to control the forces of nature.
Lasses. I mean, that's kind of what you're saying, right?
Laughs. Well, I suppose you could see it that way. But, all jokes aside, the source uses this idea of controlling time to really dig into some of the ethical dilemmas of capitalism. Oh, right, right. It's not all fun and games with our sorcerer overlords at the Fed. There's a serious side to all of this.
Exactly. Because if the core mechanism of our financial system is built on this desire for control, this desire to bend time to our will, well, it raises some pretty uncomfortable questions. Questions about exploitation, about inequality, like who gets to control this time magic and who bears the costs. Those are the kinds of issues the source is raising.
Right, right. And it makes you think about that old debate around usury, charging interest on loans. It's an ancient argument, but this source makes it feel incredibly relevant to our modern capitalist system.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that same tension, right? The tension between profit and, well, ethical considerations. For centuries, people have been wrestling with the morality of profiting from lending money. And today, with things like payday loans and these predatory lending practices, well, it's clear that debate is far from over.
It's like this whole alchemy of economics, right? It creates this illusion of stability. But if we're basing our financial systems on, I don't know, ancient desires for control, on manipulating language, all of that, how stable can it really be? It makes you wonder.
And that's really the core question the source is trying to get us to grapple with.
Yeah.
It argues that this idea of financial stability, well, it's often just that, an illusion. We build these complex systems, stock markets, banks, international trade agreements, all of it, and we rely on them.
Yeah.
We have to. We place our faith in their inherent stability. But what if that stability is far more fragile than we think it is?
Right. It's like building a house on sand. Sure, it might look solid for a while, but it only takes one good one good storm to come along and wash it all away. So what are the implications of all this? Like, what does this mean for me, for our listeners, if this illusion of stability suddenly crumbles away?
Well, it begs us to really look at the systems we depend on, systems we often take for granted. Our savings, our investments, even our jobs, they're all built on this foundation of perceived financial stability. And if that foundation is fundamentally flawed, well, it impacts every aspect of our lives.
This is starting to feel very real, and I think this ties into another point the source brings up, this whole idea of alchemy as a metaphor for economic growth.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we talk about economic growth like it's a given, right? Like it's this law of nature. But is it? Is that just more magical thinking?
It's like those alchemists trying to turn lead into gold. I mean, they were chasing after something that might not even be possible, driven by this belief that they could create something precious out of, well, essentially nothing. And the source suggests that maybe, just maybe, we're doing the same thing with our pursuit of endless economic growth. Like maybe it's fueled by that same kind of magical thinking, blinding us to the true costs, the real-world consequences.
And that brings us to the final point the source makes, this whole idea of the circular logic of finance. Break that down for me. What does that even mean?
Basically, the source is arguing that many of the core concepts we use in finance, things like time value of money, even though they're presented as objective economic principles, are actually inherently self-referential. It's like a giant echo chamber, where certain narratives are amplified and the system is designed to basically justify itself.
So we're back to the magic. Laughs. It's all a grand illusion. But no, seriously, this has been an incredible deep dive. Thank you for taking us down the rabbit hole on this one. I honestly feel like I'm seeing the matrix of our financial system now. It's both amazing and a little terrifying.
It is fascinating how these two seemingly totally disparate worlds, finance and ancient mysticism, are actually so deeply intertwined, isn't it?
It really is. So, listener, here's something to chew on as we wrap things up. If our financial systems, the very systems we rely on every day, are built on this foundation of alchemy, with all of its illusions and manipulations and potential for instability, what does that say about the stability we so often take for granted? That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for exploring with us. We'll see you next time.